I wondered if I could show a few photographs that I took just today during a short walk around a quaint Southwest Portland neighborhood of signs on poles. So this is it's a pretty white neighborhood, as Portland is, pretty gentrified, I think. It's a little commercial area. It's Multnomah Village. And within about a 5-block area, I took 20 photographs, and some of these are not high quality. I'm going to show 14 or so here, 14 I think here, and I'd love us to just talk about them, and then at the end, it's a good segue to talk about Black Lives Matter. So, Zach, if you want to show, these are posters that I saw in about 5-block radius in Southwest Portland today on June 23rd, 2020. And for those who will be listening and not seeing, this one says Black Lives Matter, hands up, don't shoot, color is not a crime. Okay, that makes sense. And you've got people drawn. It's, the artwork is good, it's interesting, and people in masks behind it. So that looks like an honorable representation of what Black Lives Matter is claiming to be.
It's a warm image of this protest.
Absolutely. Let's see. Next one. So sorry about the lighting here. It's super bright and hot out here in Portland today. A few simple truths that I believe. This one says, no one should live in fear. Murder is wrong no matter what uniform you wear. And justice shouldn't be something we have to demand. I'll be done marching when I see a change. This too, I find completely honorable. And this was in the window of a metal arts shop, and I thought it was actually going to be like a book art shop, printmaking, and maybe they have letterpress in there, but this looks like a handmade letterpress sign with completely honorable sentiments. All of these things, anyone who can't get behind, no one should live in fear, or murder is wrong no matter what uniform you wear, that actually indicates a problem in the head of that person if they think people should be living in fear. Now we are moving into slightly more ideological, already memed sentiments. No justice, no peace, which is one of the things you'll hear chanted. Black Lives Matter, and this is folded, so it is actually spelled correctly there, with the now familiar Black Lives fist, but also the hands reaching up. I can imagine this, people reaching for justice and trying to do right. So.
Can I just point out,
Yeah.
No telling what was on the artist's mind, but that fist and those hands are not a match. Those hands are comparatively dainty, and that fist is robust.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's not a subtle message about what they wrongly call allyship here.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so the anthropological term would be sort of gracile versus robust forms. In which the gracile forms are the allies, and the robust, which is, say, the stronger and physically more dominant forms are the powerful ones. Yeah, and of course, one of the things about being a human is that we have moved farther away from might making right in general. We have been able to do that through our complex sociality and, frankly, through our laws and our morals.
Yes, alliances make strong. But then that raises all sorts of questions about these alliances, which are created through this process that we talked about at the beginning, where the only right answer is, yes, I agree. And then once you agree, you'll get your orders.
That's right. Okay, next one. We cannot allow their voices to go unheard anymore. This is a handwritten sign, hashtag justice for all, hashtag BLM, hashtag silence is violence. There, an allusion to what you were suggesting earlier. And then up at the top, hashtag amplify melanated voices, which that's not a thing. And that's dehumanizing again, right? This brown and black bodies trope that is emerging is dehumanizing, as is the idea of melanated voices. On the other hand, we cannot allow their voices to go unheard anymore. I object to the anymore the same way I object to the second A in MAGA.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's exactly the same thing. Make America great. Let's do it. Make America great for everyone, because it wasn't great for everyone at any point in the past. And this is a point you have made repeatedly. We cannot allow their voices to go unheard, for sure. Everyone needs to be able to have a voice in a democracy. But anymore, look at the history in this country over, since the civil rights movement, and ask yourself who actually is being disappeared by the mainstream media. And the idea that there are whole demographics whose voices aren't heard, and that this is the moment that we must change that, is not reflective of what the reality we've been living.
It's really not reflective. And I like your point about the analogy here to MAGA. There's something psychological about the statement in which you are already rooting for the statement at the point you get to the twist at the end that forces you to agree to something that isn't true.
Exactly.
And it's really, I think you have to read through the whole thing before you say anything about what you think about it. And then,
But we all do this thing that I'm doing right now, nodding along. Like, I'm going to nod along to you, because if you end up saying something crazy, you don't tend to, in my estimation. But also I can then be like, you know what, actually, no. But, we're being asked to sign on to these things. Yes, we cannot allow their voices to go unheard, period. Yes, make America great, period.
Yeah. And the risk of alienating many, many people. I have been paying attention to Tucker Carlson's little essays that he puts on nightly of late. And I must say there's something 25% of each one that feels like it's pandering to a particular constituency. But there's a good 75% of them that is right on target, and strikes me as quite patriotic and open-minded. And, he pointed out the other night, we have elected a black president, right? And we can try to parse that any way we want. But at some level, the idea that black voices are unheard is just simply inconsistent with the history that we all know. And the same thing was true at Evergreen. White supremacy is alive and well at Evergreen. It's everywhere. We had a black president for how long?
Of the college.
Of the college, right. And so, in any case, the point is
for the entire duration of the black president of the United States, Les Burse was president of the college, and for a time before and after that as well.
Right. And this claim erupted full force at the place where we were dedicating a building to that president, and, he was there to speak, and he was interrupted in order to challenge white supremacy. It's preposterous. The juxtaposition is really stark. But at the point that you say something like, well, I can't sign on to that statement, it's like, aha, knew it. White fragility.
Right.
Exactly.
All right, next sign. Racism and police violence happen here, it says. In the past month alone, italics, George Floyd, I'm going to butcher these names, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and Tony McDade have been brutally murdered by police officers. This could happen any day in our community. We cannot remain silent. So how can I help? Donate your money and time. 2, contact your local reps and demand accountability. 3, talk sense into racist family members and friends. Again, some of the sentiments here. All right, this could happen in our community, maybe. Racism and police violence happen here. What is the here? This is in a neighborhood, in a city, where there has been a killing of a black man at the hands of the police officers in the last couple of years, which is quite contentious with regard to what the specifics were, and it seems pretty clear to everyone that there was confusion and perhaps intent on the part of the young man who was killed. These things didn't all happen here. So here we have the gaming of the language and the flyers, where you get an immediate emotional response. Racism and police violence happen here.
Right.
Here are the names of the people.
Right.
Those aren't here. And that's not to say that we aren't all living in a society that does have racism and police violence. But this is beginning to melt into actual lies, I think.
So, and it also dovetails with some things that we've talked about earlier. The strangeness of the protests at Yale, where Nicholas Christakis, one of the most decent people that we've ever encountered, is challenged as if he is vile by people who are claiming oppression, who are highly privileged, right? The whole thing just cannot be made to add up if you take it at face value. We are seeing protests spread from the U.S. to other places. We've started to get contacts from our friends in Britain who are watching a protest that doesn't make any sense because the relationship between Black Europeans and white Europeans is not an exact mirror for what goes on in the U.S. They're quite different. This is palpable to us when we have traveled there. And yet the internet is causing this wave of sentiment. I guess maybe I'll put it this way. Because the mechanism of transmission is contagion, right? It's not persuasion, it's contagion. And because it's contagious, because it's built to be contagious, the point is, well, what's to stop it from being contagious across an ocean if we are as close as our screens to what's taking place over there? So the little traps that, cause us to, chase our tails here in North America are also causing people who happen to speak the same language to be chasing their tails in the British Isles, even if it doesn't apply. And so this is a huge danger. And at some point, I think we need to talk about people have an old model of what to fear. And because you would imagine that revolution would grow from a central point in some way, but in fact, what it's done is it's made a demographic transition where a lot of nonsense was fed into a lot of kids' heads in college, and those people then went into institutions. It's like, oh, guess what? Sleeper cell inside of every institution of a certain size, and a certain size is like above 20 people.
Yeah, and the nonsense was not just fed into kids' heads in college. It's in the K-12 schools, and it has been for a while, because the schools of ed have been captured for at least a decade or more.
Yeah.
There's a good essay by a friend of ours on this, which rather than butcher the title, I will find it and speak to directly another time. But even worse, that children, not just college students who are children in many regards yet, but actual children are being indoctrinated.
Children who inherently, by the nature of children, have no mechanism to protect against what they are being told is the truth, right? That we are supposed to protect them from dangerous falsehoods at that age. So they're open to things that adults will tell them. Yeah. And we are now, our schools of eds are now feeding this mind virus into these young heads with no defense mechanism. Yep. And it only gets worse from there.
That's right. Okay, next poster. Bad apples spoil the bunch. Demand that the Multnomah County Commissioner divest money from racist policing initiatives and jails and redirect funds for housing, mental health services, schools, and more. So let me just show the next two as well, because they're all in this sort of defund the police bit.
I want to come back to the apples, though.
Okay. So let me show the next two, and then I'll... $245,169,804 for policing, it says. No, thank you. We'd rather have accessible food programs. Care Not Cops, PDX. Okay, and the next one, in the same vein, $245,169,804 for policing, ? No, thank you. We'd rather have free public transportation. At Care Not Cops, PDX. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking, $30 for family dinner. We'd rather have an Xbox. It's like swapping these things in here. A, do you know what that amount is? Are you in a position to evaluate how reasonable that amount is? And also just the idea of we'd rather have this than that. And my point would be, you want to talk about the problem with policing, fully up for an adult conversation about even throwing out the entire model and replacing it with something that works better. But you want to tell me you want to start by removing the police? You're telling me you don't understand the first thing about what civilization is and how it runs. And you imagine somehow that whatever was before civilization you can return to, and you haven't stopped to think about the density that we live at. You don't understand why you may be decrying violence that shouldn't be there, and it shouldn't be there, but you have no idea how much violence would be there if you pulled out the thing that stops it. Even corrupt, terrible cops prevent violence by virtue of the fact that when violence happens, cops get called, and even the terrible ones are, maybe the most frightening ones to encounter. So
that's right. And once again, here we have an emotional ploy. You don't think we should defund the police? What are you, against public transportation? You don't think we should defund the police? What are you, against accessible food programs?
Right.
How dare you?
Yeah.
You don't think people should eat? You don't think people should be able to get to their jobs and their families if they can't pay for it? How dare you, sir?
It's an attack on your values,
Yep.
and it is enough to drive a systems thinker insane because these things aren't hooked up. It's not like a blue Lego you can swap out for a red one. It's it's something totally different. So yeah, the
apples
point.
one?
I do want to go back and say
bad apples spoil the bunch.
Bad apples spoil the bunch. That is actually the original sentiment.
Yep.
Now, almost every time I hear bad apples invoked, it is invoked in a way that is incoherent, right? To say, well, it's not that the police are bad. It's a few bad apples suggest that those apples haven't tainted anything else. Here, at least they've got that right, right? The whole idea is, well, if you think the bunch is okay, you don't understand the nature of bad apples. They turn the whole thing bad. Now, the question is it true? Does that apply to things like policing, right? And it's an interesting question.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it would be impossible for there not to be some effect of having a corrupt policeman in your midst if you are, even if the rest of the police are not corrupt. That corruption does have an insidious spreading effect.
Yep. Well, and let's just say one of the things that we're learning relatively late in our understanding of what human beings are and how they function is how many things are contagious, including things like happiness. You know, you walk into a room with a dour look on your face and it actually spreads. You walk into a room with a smile on your face, it spreads, and it actually changes the circuitry. It changes your understanding of your own mental state, which is why guys on the make are so fond of telling women they should smile more, because the point is if you can get a woman to smile, even by tricking her into doing it, she'll think she likes you better than she actually does. So anyway, all of the...
Great. Dating advice from Brett Weinstein.
Sorry.
No, this is a point that we should come back to and devote some more time to, but absolutely.
But just the number of things that are contagious, that are now contagious over the internet across an ocean, that make for a completely incoherent narrative where suddenly, police violence happens here in a place where police violence may be exceedingly rare by virtue of the fact that here seems like it encompasses everybody who has a conversation in a language you can understand. So back to our earlier point about losing our minds.
Yeah, right. Okay. Let's see. This is a little hard to read. Sorry. It may take a while to comprehend your role in racist problems, but keep in mind that people are dying while they wait for you. And then it attributes this quote to someone named Jen Winston of Black Lives Matter. This is a claim that is now simply being trotted out, a la the claims in White Fragility in the book, that is untestable because your role in racist systems is so vague. What systems are racist, what makes them racist, and what is your role, that it is untestable. And so we are told, and I think actually, one of these, maybe I didn't include it because the picture was bad, advises that you can't just be not racist, you must be anti-racist. And this speaks exactly to some of what you and John McWhorter were talking about, that it is the quote-unquote anti-racist movement that is the religious movement. And it shows that they're good at PR, right? Antifa. If you're anti-fascist, well then, if you're anti-fascist, you must be pro-fascist. If you're anti-racist, you must be pro-racist. And of course, that's not actually true. That disagreeing with these movements makes you the thing that they claim to be fighting against, because it's really easy to claim to be fighting against something.
Well, I think we need to start engaging the idea that these are not terms and claims. They are moves.
Chess moves.
Yeah, they are moves. This is a system. And if you try to navigate by intuition, you will find yourself its pawn. There's no escaping it.
Yeah.
So I remember actually the first time I heard the term anti-racist. It was totally positive. Okay. First time I heard it was in the 4:00 meeting at Evergreen, where violence nearly broke out several times, and on
the first day of the protests that were turning into riots.
Yeah, where they were calling for my head. I decided to go to the meeting. They complained about the fact that I was there because would a guy who thought he was in danger come to a meeting like this? Now, of course, I hadn't felt that I was in danger until that meeting, but in any case, I was there, and several extremely courageous students stood up to defend me, including several students of color, right?
Your
and
students,
my students
who knew you.
Who knew me, who felt it imperative that they speak on my behalf, which I still am honored by their willingness to confront a very angry mob when, in fact, they would be targeted for doing so.
Including at least a couple of small-bodied women of color, right?
Yep.
Like, people who could easily have been at physical risk even if other people weren't.
And one such woman stood up in that meeting. The tape exists. You can look at Benjamin Boyce's documentation of that meeting, and you can see her defending me. And she says, not only is he not racist, he's anti-racist. And I heard her say that, and I thought, I'd never thought to use that term, never heard it, but what a lovely thing for someone to say about you, right? And now I feel about it exactly as I feel about feminism. There was a time when I would have said I was a feminist because I thought what feminism meant was equal opportunity for women. And of course I'm for that. But obviously feminism...
And frankly, the National Organization for Women thought enough of you to give you an award to that effect.
They did.
Back when you were fighting both racism and misogyny on the campus of Penn, the first college that you went to.
Yep. But, you sign up for these things. I'm not even sure when feminism became a term that I couldn't get behind, but at some point it was like, no way, right? That's not me.
Third wave went off the rails in the 90s. Again, a topic for many other conversations.
Right. Yeah. But my point is, you can't even just navigate. There's no basis to navigate other than, I want you to write down the definition. I'm not signing on to any word you can't define. Yeah. Which, is all.
And I want a stable definition that I can refer back to so that you can't just say, oh, no, that's not what we ever meant.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, here we go. This is what I call a don't hurt me wall. This is a business that's put up as many of these as they possibly can, hoping presumably that they don't get vandalized. Now, this is in a part of Portland that hasn't been vandalized yet, but one never knows. And just a close-up on one of these is, if you are a person who believes in love, justice, integrity, and equity for all people, then you know that this work is non-negotiable, says Layla F. Saad. Again, Black Lives Matter. So once again, we are being told, and did we hear this at Evergreen as well?
Yep.
If you do not sign on not only to our conclusion, but also our methods and everything about what we are doing and how we are intending to accomplish it, then, in this case, you do not believe in love, justice, integrity, equity for all. Yep. Those cannot be values that you hold if you do not follow us in lockstep.
And the bodies in that one are buried under the word this.
This work. This work.
You
exactly.
have signed on to this work.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Yeah, it just...
Yep. Okay, so here we're nearing the end of these. Commit to being anti-racist. And there's a QR code. And I'm going to show you what happens when you link on that QR code when we get to the very end of these, which is just a couple more. Commit to being anti-racist. Another one, donate. Put your money where your mouth is. Same QR code. It goes the same place. And before I show you where that goes, which is basically, it's going to show you how you can put your money where your mouth is. $30 for a family meal? How dare you? Why don't you put your money to these? Now, I'm exaggerating, but to your point earlier, one final image that I took on the streets of Multnomah Village in Portland today. Stonewall was a riot started by Black and Latinx trans women. Bang, bang, bang. That seems like an outlier. What the heck is that doing there, right?
What is that doing there?
So, Zach, if you could take down my screen for a minute while I find what happens to... what happens when we click through on that QR code. Here we are. Okay, so Zach, let's pull this back up. It's a compiled list of donation resources that are supposedly, they include providing bail money, among other things, for people who have been taken in. And, otherwise, these all kind of sound right, except LGBTQ specific organization. What does that have to do with Black Lives Matter? Well, let's just scroll down a little bit and we very quickly find, so Black Lives Matter, good. Black Trans Travel Fund. What is that? And then a mutual aid project developed in order to help provide Black transgender women with the financial resources needed to be able to self-determine safer alternatives to travel. So this isn't about Black people. It's about Black transgender people. And it's not even about Black transgender people. It's about Black trans women. So this is a point that I'm sure we will return to because this is becoming really a little terrifying about the connection here. But let me just, that's hardly the only trans thing on this list. And I say this, as someone as I've made really clear so many times, we have trans friends. We had trans students. Trans is real. Trans is rare. This is being politicized and is tearing down a lot of the important protections in society. So we have the Trans Women of Color Collective, the Trans Justice Funding Project, and there are a couple more up there that I and then, this once honorable organization, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has become quite captured.